This video is going to demonstrate the manual blending of two images to achieve a high dynamic range, more than is available in either one of them. We're going to go and open in a folder. It's called Sunrise Manual. We're going to open a highlight and a shadow image for number 0650. I'm going to separate them and look at both of them. If yours are tabbed to a tab bar and you can't pull them down, it's because your preferences, general preferences, need to have checked allow floating documents in the expert mode, and that's for people using Elements. We should be able to pull them off the tab bar in full Photoshop. So I'm going to look at them and decide which one has more correct exposure than not correct. And my Sunrise Shadows has the foreground quite well exposed for sunrise. So that's going to be the background, or my image that I'm going to work with. And the other one, Sunrise Highlights, which has better reflections and clouds, is going to be moved into the Sunrise Shadows image. To do that, I must activate by clicking on the name bar Sunrise Highlights 0650. And I'm going to drag it and drop it into the other image. But to do that, not only do I have to get the Move tool, but I must also hold down the Shift key because I want this image to center itself on the other one. So with the Shift bar down, I'm going to hold my mouse button down and drag this till it's over the other. Let go of my right hand, but hold the Shift key. If you lifted the Shift key too soon, it won't be centered, in which case you just do it over. I want it to be centered on top of the other image. Once I've moved Sunrise Shadows onto the other one, I don't need the original Sunrise Highlights. When I moved it over, I don't need to keep the original file open. So I'm just going to hit the close bar and just close it. So what I have left is one document called Sunrise Shadows, and with the highlight layer on top of it. So if you look at your layers panel, obviously the top layer covers up the bottom layer, so all you're seeing is the highlights image. I'm going to put a layer mask that's black over the top, on the top layer, to hide this image I just moved. So to get a black mask, go to the either top in Elements or the bottom of the layers panel in Photoshop. Find the rectangle with the circle in the middle, and before you click on it, hold down the Alt or Option button and then click, and the mask you get will be black. So what we've done is hidden that entire layer that has the highlights correctly, and all we see is the bottom layer. And what I'm going to do is go and cut a hole in the black mask just where I want to see that layer. So I want to see that layer for the sky. I want to see that layer for the stream. And so I'm going to, with that layer mask active, and you can see the little blue outline, go over to the Tools panel, choose the Brush tool, come down and be sure your foreground color is white, because to cut a hole in a black mask, we paint with white. If you happen to have black as the top one, you just hit the bent arrow and exchange them so white is on top. And then you want to be sure you have a soft brush. And if your image is hanging over the Elements option bar and partially hiding it, you can make this file go back where it belongs, making it fit on screen. To do that, I go to the View menu, and when I pull it down, I see Fit on Screen, which happens to be Command or Control 0. And when I do it, it pops into the area so my option bar in Elements is totally visible. So I have the brush, and I have white. I have a soft edged brush. I might mention here that if your brush appears to be hard and you want to make it soft, You don't have to open it up like this and go down and scroll to find the soft you want. Instead, we have a keyboard command that gives us more control over how hard or soft a brush is. And that's that go up to the keyboard where you have letter P. We all know that the left and right bracket keys will make your brush larger or smaller. I'm going to put the brush over the image and let you see that. The right bracket makes it larger. The left bracket makes it smaller. If I add the shift key when I do that, I can make it harder or softer. So with the shift key down, the right bracket, if you look at the brush icon in the option bar, it gets a hard brush. And if I hit the shift down with the left bracket key, it gets me a soft brush. And it gives you brushes in several degrees of hardness and softness. Sometimes that's handy to have not just one very hard or one very soft. So that's just a new way to use the bracket keys next to the letter P, but using the shift key to make them into soft or hard brush controls. So I have a soft brush, my mode is normal, and my opacity should depend upon how much I want to reveal of the layer below it. Since I'm never quite sure whether that whole darkened sky is what I want, I normally start the opacity somewhere in the middle, around 50%. And if I want more of it revealed, I'll paint a second time. So let's review. My brush, which is up over the sky, could afford to be larger to cover that area. The right bracket key will give me a larger brush. And if I want to paint over that area and get rid of the black, cut it through, make it white, I must remember to hold my mouse button down while I'm doing the brush. If I don't and I lift it, I'll get a second 50% application. I want to brush the sky entirely with one brush stroke. So hold the mouse button down and start moving your mouse button over the area. And when I get to the bottom, I don't have to be overly worried about the area. My brush is always soft on the edges. And if I haven't lifted my mouse button, I can go over it several times till I'm sure I have 50% applied. Then I lift my hand off the mouse button and I look at it and say, does that blend the foreground or do I need it to be darker? And I think I need it to be darker. In fact, I could put 50% more, which will get me up to about 75% of the strength, or I can decide at this point, I think I want to cut it through entirely. I want that fully saturated dark sky. So I am going to go and raise the opacity of my brush to 100%. And the next time I paint, I will completely clear the mask away and it'll be white there. So hold the button down, don't lift it. Go right around and go over what you did before, just over to the edge of the tree line. Be sure you haven't missed any areas in the corners, and then lift your hand, and you have brought back the full potential of that sky and added it to the lighter foreground. When it comes to the reflection down here, I'm not sure I want it quite as dark as 100% would be, so I'm going to lower my opacity to about 50%, and I'm going to make my brush somewhat smaller. I want it to fit within the stream, not on the grass. So I've got it 50%, I'm painting white on the mask, hold the mouse button down, come over. And if you don't lift your mouse button, you can go over it more than once to be sure you got it all. And then lift your hand. And then I get to decide, is that the right darkness for that reflection to match the sky? And we know that reflections are never as intense as their original sky. So I have several things I can do to test this. If I want to go back and see whether this layer improved my image, I can point to the eyeball in front of the top layer and click it. My image goes back to the original, which was lightened for shadows, but of course had a light sky. If I click it again, I bring back the rich sky. And then I can decide if that's right. As long as I have a mask here, I can do more. If I didn't like the sky and I thought I'd overdone it, I could paint with black at a very low opacity, and I could lighten that sky a little, because what would that black do? It would partly cover the white hole and put the black over the mask again. And if I look down here at the gray for the stream, if I want that stream to be darker, I can go over that again and cut away more of the black mask, and I would have a darker stream. But I find that works quite well for the way it is there. So at this point, I'm going to be content. And if you have areas, this does not necessarily mean this is totally finished. It means you have blended 2 layers. And once you blend 2 layers, you can go ahead and develop that picture more. I believe when I worked it, after I did that, I added a brightness and contrast layer, and I wanted it only to affect the foreground. So let's see how I would do it. I'd first get the brightness and contrast layer. So if you come up to the options for your layers panel and you see the bicolor circle, which is the doorway to adjustment layers, and you click it open, if you choose brightness and contrast, you'll get a new adjustment layer, which is going to apply brightness and contrast. And before we do it, it has a white mask, which means that the entire picture will get the brightness and contrast. If when we're done, we don't like what it did to the sky, we will black out that part of the mask and hide this adjustment. So let's start by seeing what happens. So I've got, if you don't see the little layer for brightness and contrast, you get to it by double-clicking in the front icon of the brightness and contrast adjustment layer. And when you double-click on that, it will open this adjustment layer. So if you didn't see it, that's how you get it. So I'm going to apply brightness, and I'm only going to worry about the foreground grasses and trees. So I'm going to add some brightness to it a little, and then I'm going to add contrast to that area. And I can work those 2 sliders till I like what is happening to the foreground. Now keep in mind, all the light on the foreground is sort of reflected off those clouds, because this is sunrise before the sun gets above the horizon. So I have to use good taste in applying that. If I make it too bright, you'll wonder where's the light coming from. So I chose about that much. And if I hide this whole layer and see what happens to the clouds, I can decide if I like the effect on the clouds. So I'm going to use the eyeball and hide this layer and see what happens to the clouds. Oh, I prefer the clouds the way they were before. So let's say, how can I hide this adjustment layer from the clouds? Well, we have a layer mask which is white, which means everything is showing through. If I want to hide the adjustment from the cloud area, I must paint the mask black in the area of the clouds. The first thing you do is click on the mask. You see that blue outline? That means the mask is where I'm working, not the image. And I want to hide the effect it had on the clouds. So I must paint with black. So come over to your panel and get your tool for brushing. And this time I want black, not white. So I have to reverse my colors so that black is in the foreground. And of course I still have a soft brush. I haven't changed it. And I have to decide, do I want to get all of that darkness back? I really think I do. If so, my opacity can come up to 100%. And that will mean I will brush away all of the brightness and contrast adjustment from the sky. That is, providing I only brush on the sky. So I'm set, and I still like the size of my brush, so I hold the button down and do not lift it. And I come all the way across here and all the way down until I've brought back the rich, dark sky. And that means I want to come all the way down and be sure my brush just barely overlaps the trees and grass on the hills. And if I'm not sure if I did a good job, since I haven't lifted my mouse button, I can go over it several times till I'm sure I brought it all back. Then I lift my hands, and if I go over and look at the mask, you can see what I did. By applying black to the sky, I brought back all of the rich sky. Now, what do you think that layer did to the reflection? Is it okay, or did it brighten it? Well, to get rid of that whole layer, we're going to use the little eyeball in front of the layer, but we're going to watch the reflection water. Actually, I like what it did to the reflection. If you don't, you're going to do to the reflection just what we did to the sky. You're going to paint black over the reflection in order to block the adjustment from it. So that you understand, I'm not going to get rid of this left part of the water. I like that. Maybe it brightened this upper part too much. So I need to be on the mask. Be sure you click it. I need my brush, and I need it to be black and soft. And now I have to decide, do I want to completely lose that adjustment? Well, it's up to you. My choice is maybe go down 50%. It's a little too bright from that brightness and contrast adjustment. So it's about 50%. I'm painting on the mask, and my brush has got to be sized for the water. And I'm just going to paint the upper part of this and bring it down a little bit. I'm bringing it down 50%. I lift my mouse, and I think that has a better balance. I like the effect it got in the shadows here. It made those a little more vibrant. Not shadows, in the reflection that's colorful. It made that very nice. So I look at it now, and I think I'm probably satisfied with that image. If I want to go back and see what it looked like when I first opened the sunrise shadow version, I go to the bottom layer, the background. I hold the Alt or Option key, click on the eyeball for the background layer, and I'll lose the upper two layers. That's what I started with. And this is what happened when I added a new layer contributing the sky and then made an adjustment to the foreground. So I hope that will help you to know sometimes our automatic HDR software gets a result which has been tone mapped to the point where it doesn't look natural. And you can, now that you know how to use masks, you can actually manually blend 2 or more exposures and come up with a blended image that you have created yourself. Of course, what I need to do now is save my finished image. And my rule is, I want to save it with all of its layers, all of its work. What if I wake up tomorrow and decide I overdid something or underdid it or want to adjust it? If I've saved all the layers, I can still work on this image. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and when I name it, I'm going to call it Blended Sunrise, because it's the blend of the two. And I want it to be a Photoshop document. That's the format. In Elements, they know you should be using that format because you have layers, and they will suggest it. But be sure you're not saving it as a JPEG, or you will all merge all those layers together and you will have lost your work. So with it as Photoshop, I can go ahead and click Save. And I've created an image with all my work on it, and I can kind of sleep on it and come back another day and see if it needs further work.